And they'll sort you out. Right. First of all, we've got Mark, I think. Yep. Right, we've got Mark Jones who's going to speak to you to start off with from the Born Free Foundation. Here's Mark.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much indeed. I'll move a bit further away from that and see if I can stop it making that noise. My name's Mark Jones. I'm a vet. I'm from the Born Free Foundation, and I'm really, really glad to be here. And it's fantastic to see so many people out today, letting the people of Herefordshire know that this horrendous badger cull that's been going on just down the road from here for the last 2 or 3 years could well be coming to your doorsteps, to your backyards in the very near future. People need to be aware of this, and we really need to stop it. I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me along. I'd like to thank fellow speakers, particularly Dominic Dyer. What an amazing inspiration he is to everyone who's involved in the animal protection movement. I know that there's been lots and lots of these marches over the past 2 or 3 years. This movement against this horrendous cull keeps getting stronger every year. So a big thanks to Dominic and to everyone who helps to organise this. I've also been involved over the past couple of years in the Wounded Badger Patrols in Gloucestershire. I know Jean and Nick from those Wounded Badger Patrols from Gloucestershire against badger shooting are here. And again, a huge thanks to everyone who's out in the cull zones during the culls, trying to keep an eye and trying to protect our badgers from this injustice. So thank you very much. I'd just like to talk to you for a short while about the involvement of my profession, the veterinary profession, in this whole business. As I say, I am a vet. I worked very hard to become a vet. I was very proud to join the profession when I did. But that pride has been seriously dented by the support that many of my professional colleagues and the professional organisations that purport to represent vets have given to this completely horrific and unnecessary policy. And let's remember that vets play a crucial role in this whole business, from individual vets who work with farmers, who have close relationships with farmers, who advise farmers on disease control, who undertake TB testing. We're very, very tied up in the whole business of TB control. Veterinary organisations like the British Veterinary Association that have huge influence over governments, and vets who work within government under the Chief Veterinary Officer, who are involved in formulating policy. Now, vets need to take their responsibility, in my view, very seriously indeed. They should always be acting professionally, drawing on the best possible evidence and advice when giving their own advice and when helping to formulate policy. And above all, vets should be acting in the best interests of animals affected by their decisions and affected by their advice. Now that, you might think, well, that goes without saying. That's why people become vets. But it's astonishing to me that many within the veterinary profession are supporting this cull, not only supporting it, but have actually been actively involved in formulating the policy and in pushing it forward. And that's an anathema to me. I'm sure it's an anathema to many of you out there that vets can be so heavily involved in this injustice. I'd like just to start by saying that the British Veterinary Association, and some of you may not realise this, whose membership counts among them about half of UK vets, has always supported badger culling as part of the TB control effort, and still does. They did reject controlled shooting as a method of culling on welfare grounds earlier this year, but they still support badger culling and they support the rollout of badger culling. Back in 2012, when the Welsh Assembly announced that it would continue its TB control policy without culling badgers, the then BVA president, British Veterinary Association president, said this would set back our efforts to tackle this devastating disease by many years. And I believe that was completely wrong of the British Veterinary Association to say that. So how on earth does the British Veterinary Association justify its support for these culls? Well, it says its justification comes from the results of the randomised badger culling trial. Many of you will be familiar with this, a 10-year trial in which 11,000 badgers lost their lives, which cost the taxpayer £50 million. The BVA says the results of that trial support the premise that badger culling should be used to control TB in cattle. Well, all I can say is they must be reading a very different version of the results of that trial than I do. The scientists who put together the conclusions of the randomised badger culling trial said many things, but among them they said that badger culling can make no meaningful contribution to the future control of cattle TB in Britain. And they also said that it's unfortunate that agricultural and veterinary leaders continue to believe, in spite of overwhelming scientific evidence to the contrary, that the main approach to cattle TB control must involve some form of badger population control. So I believe that the British Veterinary Association is completely wrong to try and use the randomised trial and the results from the randomised trial to justify their position. Nevertheless, the BVA's decision to reject controlled shooting as a method of culling does finally signal its recognition, at least, that badger welfare is something that the veterinary profession ought to be concerned about. So I suppose that at least signals some sign of progress within the veterinary profession. Sadly, those concerns were very quickly dismissed by government ministers, who have said that free shooting can continue. And in meetings I've had with the BVA, it's clear that the British Veterinary Association won't be opposing future culls, even if they're conducted using controlled shooting. Which brings me to the Chief Veterinary Officer and his staff at DEFRA. The Chief Vet has supported badger culling since the start of the policy and has had a big role to play in its development and implementation. His advice led to the extension of culls in Gloucestershire and Somerset in the first year, and his advice has led to the government continuing to allow controlled shooting in spite of the fact that the British Veterinary Association, independent panels of experts and so on have rejected it on the grounds of humaneness. By effectively dismissing the welfare concerns of other eminent vets and experts, he has, in my view, crossed a very dangerous line. He, above all others in the veterinary profession, is in a unique position to call the government to account, and in my view he's failed to act when he should have done to prevent the suffering of potentially thousands and thousands of badgers. There are other individual vets within my profession that have been very vocal in support of badger culling and have said what I think are some completely unjustifiable things. One prominent cattle vet from Gloucestershire has been quoted as saying, "The killing of small black and white animals has actually saved the lives of huge numbers of large black and white animals. Yet more of my colleagues have suggested that badgers should be gassed." They have clearly never read the reports of the appalling suffering endured by badgers during the gassing trials that were carried out at Porton Down in the early 1980s, and they were really shocking. And perhaps most worryingly of all, some vets have reportedly suggested they might turn a blind eye if their farming clients took the law into their own hands and killed badgers on their own land by using such appalling techniques as lacing food with paracetamol and rolling it into badger sets. Now, for vets who are supposed to care above all about animal welfare, to even suggest this kind of thing is, in my mind, completely and utterly unacceptable. Of course, history and recent experience tells us that bovine TB can be controlled perfectly well without resorting to the slaughter of wildlife. The last time bovine TB was a massive problem for the cattle industry was in the late 1950s, early 60s, and cattle-based measures were introduced which reduced the number of cattle slaughtered across the country because of TB from just over 25,000 in 1959 to just over 2,000 10 years later. And all of that was achieved before we even knew badgers could get TB. And in the past 5 years, stricter cattle-based measures in Wales have reduced the number of cattle slaughtered because of TB by half, without a single badger being shot. Similar measures are already having big impacts across much of the west of England. Here in Herefordshire and Worcestershire, cattle slaughtered because of TB have reduced from about 3,500 in 2008 to well under 2,000 in 2014. That's a fall of 45% without killing any badgers. So we don't need to kill badgers to control TB in cattle. The messaging coming from government and from parts of the veterinary profession that badgers are to blame for TB in cattle and that going out and shooting them will somehow solve this problem is just plain wrong. Playing the badger blame game doesn't help struggling farmers. Convincing them that spending some of their hard-earned money, hard-earned cash going out and killing badgers will only make matters worse, and I believe it's disingenuous and unprofessional for members of my profession to be advising their clients, their farming clients, that that's what they should do. We, the veterinary profession, need to learn that if we want to have public confidence in our claim that we're acting in the best interests of animals, that we have to show that we're concerned about the welfare of all animals, and that includes wild animals that are affected by the decisions we make and the advice that we give. I'd just like to finish by saying that not all vets think the same way that the chief vet does or the British Veterinary Association does with its policies on this particular issue. There is a growing number of vets, veterinary nurses, other veterinary professionals who are finding their voice and who are saying, no, this is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. We should be accepting the evidence that you don't have to kill badgers in order to control TB in cattle. In fact, killing badgers can make things worse. And we, as veterinary professionals, must put animal welfare above all else, and we must have a huge concern for the welfare impacts of this horrendous policy. I do take some hope in the fact that there are more and more vets and vet nurses and others doing this and saying these things, and I do hope that those people will eventually have an impact on the British Veterinary Association and the Chief Veterinary Officer, and we can get a much, much better approach to this problem from the veterinary profession than we've had today. So thanks very much for coming out today. It's great to see so many of you here. Keep up this fantastic work, and we can bring this horrendous policy to an end. Thank you.